Good evening, and welcome to Busboys and Poets. My name is Keelan Lewis. Why me for the moderator for contemporary Indigenous performance? Since bell bottoms and disco, I haven't performed lately. But I do currently perform at overseeing the Artist Leadership Program at the National Museum of the American Indian. I believe that might be the connection. The Artist Leadership Program targets a cast of characters, namely artists from all forms of disciplines, from the entire Western Hemisphere and Hawaii, who are curious to research in the collections of the Smithsonian, and then return home to their homelands and share their new information with their communities. This is a large part of my identity, but not complete. I am Navajo, and my mother's clan is Tohiklini, and my father's clan is Tutnansani. That's how I identify myself. Now you know who I am. And the CIA cannot take it away from me. So, thanks very much for this privilege and honor to moderate this evening's panel. Tonight we have with us two nationally recognized Native artists and one nationally known author and journalist. Rosy Simas, a contemporary dance choreographer based in Minneapolis, is currently on tour in 14 cities in the United States and Canada for her latest work, We Wait in the Darkness, which is showing this weekend at the dance place not too far from where we are at Busboys and Poets in Brooklyn, because there are several Busboys and Poets here in town. So I hope you're able to purchase some tickets and for this weekend's performances. Rosy is also a 2013 Native Arts and Cultures Dance Fellow. Rosy is also a 2015 Guggenheim Fellow. A fellowship, yes. Yeah. A fellowship intended for men and women who have already demonstrated exceptional capacity for productive scholarship or exceptional creative ability in the arts. Congratulations, Rosy. And we also have Christopher Morgan, a contemporary dance maker based here in Washington, D.C. is currently preparing for his 2-week summer professional dance summer intensive that is designed to inspire, nurture, and challenge serious pre-professional and professional dancers that is to take place next month at the American Dance Institute here in Rockville, Maryland. Congratulations. And sitting to my right is Laura Waterman-Whitstock, a noted author and journalist who's had her reporting experience here in Washington, D.C. as a reporter and later executive director for the American Indian Press Association. Laura also writes opinions in the Indian Country Today Media Network and the Minneapolis Star-Tribune's Your Voices. Welcome. And I'd also like to make note that we have in the audience Francois Richon, who is a sound composer of international acclaim that includes both live performances and sound engineering and recordings. Francois also created the original sound composition for Rosy's work, We Wait in the Darkness. Welcome, Francois. Before we begin our evening's discussion, let's thank the Busboy Poets staff and management for hosting this evening's event. Yay. Okay. As we begin to explore the theme of contemporary Indigenous performance, it would be also important to explore the effects of contemporary culture on Native people. So, I'd like to begin with some simple questions of who am I and what am I doing here? But in between all that, tell us a little bit about how you were raised And what values impressed you as a child?
I'm Rosy Simas. I'm Seneca, Heron Clan. I am a contemporary dance choreographer. I've been making dance for about 23 years. I'm here because I am touring a solo, which was really inspired by some oral family stories about my grandmother and deals with some memories of my grandmother's life. And then I coaxed my mother to be in the show, so she reads letters. She can tell you more about that. I was raised, when I was little, we were here in DC, and then we moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I was raised in the Native community there, which it is not a formal relocation city. So it is predominantly Ojibwe, even though it is Dakota territory, and then Dakota people and Ho-Chunk, I'm guessing, and then more of an intertribal mix. But from an early age, my parents fortunately brought me into the local Native culture through elders, Ojibwe elders primarily, one who my brother mentored with for 30 years. And so even though the Ojibwe culture is not the same as the Seneca culture, there are a lot of similarities in terms of values, as you're talking about. And I think everything from a certain way that we view elders to a sense of things being done for community instead of the individual, and also like an honoring of those who have passed on, and connection to family. I would say those are like the values that I learned. I don't know, did you learn those, or are they there and they're nurtured? I think that is probably more of what I think about that in terms of how we are, how our DNA is made up and what it's capable of when it's nurtured.
So I'm Christopher Morgan, and I am Native Hawaiian. Interestingly, though both my parents were born and raised in Hawaii and are part Hawaiian themselves, they enlisted in the Marines and traveled, and they actually met while they were in the Marines stationed in Southern California and decided to raise their family there. So I grew up away from the land that my people come from, though I would visit a lot as a child, visiting grandparents, aunts, and uncles and the like. That displaced feeling, though I couldn't identify it as a child, has been present my entire life, and it took adulthood to really understand that. So I'm about half Native Hawaiian and a mix of other things, Japanese, Chinese, German, and Irish. I'm a real mutt. And I think that's relevant because it really plays out in the work that I do. As a child, I learned the dances of Hawaii, Samoa, Tonga, Tahiti, Aotearoa. So all of these different parts of the Polynesian Triangle were a part of my childhood, but I learned them so young that I didn't get a good intellectual grasp of what I was doing. They were just things that were taught to me and I repeated both orally and physically. Fast forward 17 years and I'm a young man starting to learn Western dance forms, and it becomes the milieu that I work in for the following 20 years. But that muscle memory is present in everything that I do somehow. So for a long time I've been interested in how those come together, and I think why I'm here is because I think Rosy is a kindred spirit and has kind of been blazing a trail that I feel like I'm kind of skipping along behind her. In that, a lot of the things that she's been doing, I luckily coincide with, and I'm like, oh, she just did that, great. She's kind of opened a little bit of a door, and there's this space where the intersection of, even though we're from different communities, there's a space where the intersection of the contemporary and the native or indigenous can come together, and it's subject matter that we're both interested in. And I think we both have such a background in the contemporary forms and inquiry that comes with that, that is sometimes difficult to pair with the traditional. So I just feel like that's partly why I'm here, is because of a shared interest that we have in that intersection of things, and that luckily a little bit before me she started nudging along the way. And then about the values, I think like starting to understand a little bit better about that feeling of displacement, it took coming into adulthood to realize how much my parents' native Hawaiian values that come from certain things about, frankly, environmentalism, though they would never use those words, and community and family and putting others before yourself was a huge influence over my upbringing and subsequently my life and my work. And now with the perspective of time and a little deeper understanding of that culture, I realize that it really does come from that, as well as who they are innately as people, that those values are something that were shared by that community.
I'm Laura Waterman Woodstock, and I'm Rosy's mom. We have a little joke back in Minneapolis. Roger Buffalo is a very good friend of ours and a famous historian and one of the originators of the American Indian Studies Department in the whole U.S. at University of Minnesota. So when his son and our daughter were small, we were Roger and Laura, and these were our children. So now we are the parents of Rosy and Julie. Julie is coming into her own. Julie Buffalohead is a wonderful studio artist. Well, who am I and what am I doing here? I'm born into the Seneca Nation, Heron Clan. Was made to understand from toddler age how important it is who we are, and being the only girl of the family, having the capacity to carry on the identity of the clan, and through any of my children, carriers of the identity of who we are. Just as Stephen has said, he is nothing if he is not the clients of his parents. And that's how we identify in the Seneca Nation, except that it goes through the mother. Well, you have a father, my father's clan is Wolf Clan, but the clan that we belong to is the Heron Clan. And we just had a great-grandchild born last August, and he is Heron Clan, Seneca Nation. We just got his the letter from the nation saying, you know, it's official, you are a member of the tribe. So those things are part of who I am. But throughout my life, I have always known that writing was an integral part of who I am. When I was 10 years old, I had my first piece published. So I thought, oh, you know, great expectations on the part of my teachers and my principal. But for some reason, even though this was the beat generation after I graduated in high school, and poetry was so much a part of the world, and I went to San Francisco, and Lawrence Spring Getty was there. Some of the major poets were coming up, and I didn't feel as if I really fit into that. And so when Indian poetry began to be published widely, I somehow didn't feel that I belonged in that either. And so I had to kind of plow my own path, and it mainly has been things that I have been interested in what we would call the nonfiction world. And the most recent book that I have is called We Are Still Here, and it has to do with the American Indian movement from 1970 to 1981, sort of those critical years. But I think that in the larger context, you asked about what contemporary life, what effect that has on us. I think we are constantly bombarded with everything that happens, and because we are the original people who were here, we sort of are we have the experiences over the longest period of time of the influences from the outside. People immigrate to this country, they bring their culture with them, they bring their language. In a few years, they're bilingual, they're speaking two languages. They maintain their culture, and some do not. Most do. That's different than the impact on Native Hawaiian and Native American people, because we sort of got the first effects of it all the way through. And so the contemporary world doesn't seem to be more threatening. What the big questions that are happening around us in Indian country are identity. Am I a member of my tribe, having a certain amount of Indian parentage, 100%, 50%, and so on? Or do I descend from those people who are identified at a certain period in time with the United States government as being those who belong to that tribe? More and again, tribes are changing to this new way of identifying, and so people say, I am a citizen of the Seneca Nation, I'm a citizen of the Potawatomi. Not all are doing this, but enough that we're confronting the contemporary world and what it means to Indian people. And Keegan should be very proud. We have a poet laureate for the Navajo Nation. Wonderful person. I just read some of her poetry a couple of weeks ago. So that's an intro.
Thank you. I thought to open that up, just to get things started, my next two questions are for Rosy and Christopher, and then maybe we'll get an opinion from our infamous journalist here. And the next two questions are could be rather short or lengthy. It's up to you. The first one is, within the realm of performance arts, what other arts do you do?
Dance is the most immediate medium that I refer to. I think my body has had the most time in it, and there's something innately expressive about it that I just feel, and I think it has to do with having learned traditional forms as a child partly, and then just who I am. But interestingly, as a choreographer, I often find movement very limiting. So I have explored lots of different things. I also, like Rosy, collaborate with outside or other artists, musicians, sometimes projection designers, visual artists. I've done some collaborations with photographers, a sculptor. Sometimes I take my hand to things. I would not call them art as much as craft, maybe. But I'm good at smoke and mirrors. And so I think what I'm after is a way that live performance can communicate both narrative and literal ideas and things that are beyond that. My primary tool is dance, but because of its occasional limitations, I find that I'm willing to go just about anywhere And before I became a dancer at the age of 17, I actually wanted to be a writer. So I had spent most of my time writing, was going to university studying journalism, and then switched to dance. And I think that also continues to bear an imprint on my work. Text sometimes shows up in the work, but always shows up in the creative process.
So dance is my primary form, but I have recently, and I think for very similar reasons, been working with film for my work and also set design for the last two pieces, mainly out of paper and sewing. I've always been crafty, so I used to make dance clothes and things like that. But interestingly enough, I think that dance and choreography specifically is much like visual art because you experience it through the sense of vision, primarily as an audience. Luckily for me, I work with such great composers that my audience also experiences the piece aurally in a very significant way. But I think it was a natural progression for me to get behind the camera and to also work with paper. It isn't the first time that I built my own sets, but this is the first time that they've been very significant. I really think that for this work that I'm making, the dance, the sound, and the set are really three equal pieces in the story that's told, albeit not a linear story.
And the next question is, have you studied classical performances? And if so, what inspired you to do so?
Classical is a big word that can refer to many different disciplines. So I'll say yes, and then I'll clarify that a little bit. I guess when I first started dancing as a child, I was studying classical traditional forms. And I learned a lot of what people perhaps might identify as Hawaiian dance, the hula, is sort of the second generation of hula, and that depends on your experience and the contact you've had with the culture. But in my experiences, most people imagine women in grass skirts with coconut shell bras and their hands move like this. And there's often a ukulele, which did not come until Western contact, and a slack key guitar, which also came much later after Western contact. So I learned some of that, but actually the classical form of that is called kahiko, and is primarily percussive, was once done almost exclusively by men, but was not always. Both genders participated in the practice of it, but it was slightly kept more alive by men at a certain point in our culture. So I grew up learning both of those forms, the more modern and the traditional form. And then when I found my way into European-influenced dance, ballet, and then American modern dance, I did study those classical forms a bit, but I think I came of age as a dancer in a time where hybridization was really critical, and you had to be able to do many different things in order to gain employment in the field, which is probably even more so true now. So, though I studied classical forms of ballet and some classic modern dance, I actually immediately started working with teachers and choreographers who were kind of sourcing from many different things and not necessarily creating new, but using those many tools to create their voice. And now, since I'm an educator as well, I find that I do have to reference that lineage, even if it's from a more traditional modern dance perspective of, you know, okay, well, this was Petronio, and that came from Trisha, and Trisha's related to, and that was influenced by. And I think it's interesting how those classical things, even though they're quite modern in many ways and contemporary still, that sense of tradition is really important to have a greater sense of context of the work that you're making now. So, yes. That was a hard one. Classical, sir.
I did dance in powwows as a child. I don't know that there was a learning that happened that was any kind of formal thing. It was more watch and do. And then I really immediately got interested in theater. So I went to theater school in high school, and there studied very classical forms, ballet, basically Graham type of modern, and classical theater. And my specialty in high school was actually Shakespeare. And you get more classical than that. And my high school project was to go see the Royal Shakespeare Company and interview Derek Jacobi, so that's what I did. And in college I also studied, I would say that I'm a little older than Christopher, so when I went to college we were still doing Cunningham and Graham, and it was just starting to shift into some postmodern contemporary training. We still had to have 3 years of ballet, and I gravitated immediately away from those things. And I also was never interested in dancing for other people. So even though I went to a university where they were basically training people to become repertory dancers for companies or to dance for other people, I didn't have any interest in that. So it was a little like always sort of the black sheep, pardon the expression, or the going, against the grain or whatever. So I worked very closely with teachers and did a lot of composition immediately. It isn't to say that I didn't have fun dancing for a few different important people. I think Nita Little and Pearl Bogan and some other choreographers, my friend Deborah Jinsafeir. But my interest was really in painting the picture. And so that's why I draw that visual arts connection so strongly. Telling the story, so that I think comes from the theater background, wanting to tell the story and paint the picture, not so much be in the picture, other people's picture.
Excellent. Thank you for your responses to those questions. Now, I'd like to get an opinion, if I may. It might be possible about what if you listen to these two performers here, what's your opinion about contemporary Indigenous performance now?
Well, I think it's, first of all, a joy to see young Native choreographers moving not away from culture and not away from who they are and their identities, but the exploration of something that goes beyond that and captures us in our hearts when we see that dance. I have to admit that I'm sort of a crossover because I grew up in Hawaii, and so I'm very familiar with Hawaiian culture. My sister-in-law and her family and extended family, and so I knew all about that. And there's one thing that Native Hawaiians and American Indians all have in common, and that is dance is central to the expression of culture. And so I don't even want to call it new dance, but what is happening today is something that is remarkable and different. And the person that misses out on that is really in for a loss, because it's something wonderful is happening.
Thank you. The next three questions are for both of you again. First one should be relatively easy to address. Then again, maybe not. Who are your Native American or Native Hawaiian modern dance icons, and why?
Thanks for leaving for that.
Christopher K. Morgan. No, interestingly enough, I had a recent little, and he's not Native, but okay, I don't know. I have to admit, I think he's part native Mexican. But I have this little fascination with old Jose Limon videos. And part of it was, I was so attracted to his expressiveness. And it's something that, for me, in my career, that I have watched. I've seen a lot of dance. And I sort of even have, like, 4 things that I need to see in a performance for it to really engage me. And one is authenticity. One is some kind of unique movement vocabulary. And 3 is really like expression, some kind of expression, and with that content, some kind of reason behind the work. And so I'd never really paid attention to his work before, but I was watching his old videos and I was just so, it's just sort of like an organic expression rather than, I'm sure he did really dramatic stuff too. But it's that I'm drawn to, and I think that there is something cultural about that. There aren't many. I would say Rosalie Daystar Jones, although I've never seen her perform live. I've seen some video, and she's an amazing, really, she has paved the way. Really one of the first contemporary dancers. There's other people. Of course, Hane Gigama's American Dance Theater, although it being more, to me, I hope he's not listening to this, presentational powwow dance and some traditional dances which are social, so okay to share with public. But I think that bringing that awareness really across the globe, which is what he did with American Indian Dance Theater, helped also pave the way. And I really think there are those pioneers that we would really not be sitting here if it weren't for them. Yeah.
Sadly, in the Native Hawaiian community, I think there are very, very few. There are wonderful artists. The first person that came to my mind is someone who's working in a completely traditional practice named Vicky Holtakamine, and she's working completely traditionally. But I think the forward-thinking way she works, the partnerships she's built, she's actually come out here and done some research at dance places they built out and did the work on lofts next door. She's interested in that because she's got an art space grant. She's just such a forward thinker, even though her own particular artistic practice are based and steeped in tradition. But I think that void of Native Hawaiian artists that are working in a truly contemporized form is partly why it's been so slow going for me. I've been trepidatious of it. And in other cultural forms that I've seen do that word fuse, it's hard to do successfully. And with the 4 requirements that you just had, which resonate with me, it's hard to pull all of those off. So I think I've been trepidatious about it, and I've also encountered that many people, many artists in the traditional communities are hesitant to embrace it. So I feel like I've been on a 4-year process of building relationships that hopefully approve what I want to do. And even recently on a research trip, I was in Hawaii and I sent some video in advance of someone at a museum that I want to work with. And the first thing he said to me was, I'm not sure if I'm the right person to work with you because you're doing movements that are supposed to be with words in the traditional hula without the words. And I don't feel good about that. And so I had to, I spent 2 weeks emailing him, meeting him, talking to him, showing him things, trying to build up this rapport where he can understand that I'm coming at this maybe slightly different approach with authenticity and a good intentioned heart. And interestingly, this person, though a Native Hawaiian practitioner, speaking of that blood quantum, was not even Native Hawaiian by blood. I am far more Native Hawaiian than he is. And I don't even care about that, but I thought it was so interesting because we had this really, it was never confrontational, but it was quite intense. He was very clear about certain perspectives he had, and I had a differing perspective, and I'm trying to push form in a new way, perhaps. And I want to do it respectfully, so that just takes a lot of community building. And I say that because I think that's partly why there is this void. I thought of a lot of wonderful Native Hawaiian dancers who have worked with Paul Taylor and Pilates, but they were doing truly modern dance. I'm not sure, and if any of them happen to see this video, please contact me. I want to know who you are and work with you.
Okay, I have one more question to ask to help set the stage here, and that is from your own personal perspective. What is the interaction, the give and take between you, your contemporary performances, and how your cultural traditions play a role?
So I've been making work for a long time, and I would say that it's mostly contemporary work. I never brought in, I think with everything I do, the values of who I am and how I grew up, and so those things, that part of the sum of what make me Seneca, are incorporated into everything I do, and so therefore my work. So I've always said my work is Native because I'm Native, regardless of what the theme or content or subject matter, I just said the three things, and the same thing in three ways, is. And so if I was ever going to do a piece that had to do with identity, it had to just come to me as something that I wanted to do. Wasn't doing it for a specific reason. And part of that has to do with that. The Seneca culture, the longhouse culture, which is our spiritual home, is within the longhouse, is a secretive culture. And ever since I was little, my understanding, although this is my understanding and not necessarily, I don't know if other Seneca people would share this with me, is that the culture is for the Seneca people, and sharing part of our culture is not necessary to share it with the rest of the world. Although, like, I have a cousin who does social dance and does social dance demonstrations. I think that those are very important in teaching people about Haudenosaunee traditions, but that is not our longhouse. And so, for me, my identity has always been very clear. I'm Seneca. That's part of the advantage of being from a matrilineal family. So I didn't feel this need to sort of discover myself through my dance and who I was, because my identity is so clear to me. And so I've made work about a lot of other things. This work that I'm touring now came about because I was investigating, like I said, the matrilineal side of my family, and I wanted to share that. And I don't know if I'm answering your question completely, but what I will say about that is that it was really important for me not to create a voyeuristic theatrical experience for non-Indigenous people. And so my audience that I made this work for, just like when you write a letter to a particular person, is other Indigenous people. Although the work is experienced by many different kinds of people, different backgrounds, and it has a different effect because it's not meant to beat people over the head with education about Native issues, although it does deal with historical elements. The other thing about it was that there are some very particular things about it that are very Seneca. For one, Francois and I went to the Seneca territory. I went 5 or 6 times, but he went with me. And we did sound recordings there, which is the basis of the sound score. We recorded Seneca speakers, and there were things in which I did consult with friend, Seneca, elder, about. I don't know if I'm answering the question completely, but this is sort of for me how it ties in. That also, like, where I did find that there might be a line that I might cross of what I understood innately as a line that I shouldn't cross, I went to somebody and talked to them about that. And with the Seneca language that we use in the piece, there's a recording, we had some elders listen to it to make sure that we weren't using a part of it that shouldn't be used, because I don't speak Seneca and I wouldn't know firsthand. So that's a long answer to your question, but you might want to tell it to him again, because I don't think I stayed on the question at all.
Would you tell me the question again?
Yes, you did, Rosy.
From your, and we'll need to make this quick, because
Sure.
I do want to ask one more question.
Sure.
From your own personal perspective, what is your interaction, the give and take, between you, your contemporary performances, and how your cultural traditions play a role?
I'll just be brief and say one thing that I think is interesting and specific about this piece, Pohaku, that I'm making, that will premiere at Dance Place March, a year from now. And that's actually, it has to do with who it's made for. Rosy was speaking about that this piece, We Wait in the Darkness, was perhaps intended for other Indigenous people. I think the work that I'm after, in part of the research process, I started to feel like the primary audience for this work is people that don't know about the Native Hawaiian people, other than what they might see from a commercial or a vacation in Waikiki, which is probably 7.8 of our 8 million visitors each year. So I think there's an opportunity that I have, having developed and worked in a different community of artists over many years and developed an audience within that community, that I can share aspects of our story that are not well known and that really relate actually to other Native peoples here in the Americas, about colonialism and about this impact of cultures arriving into a place where there were already people that you were speaking of. So within that, I still am struggling, as I was saying before, being respectful of tradition. I do want to speak to those people, but mostly I want to speak to the people that have never heard that story with this particular work, which is, like you said, writing a letter. I'm writing a letter with that piece to someone.
That was a good way to say it. I like that letter.
Yeah, it's a really good
Okay, this is the question I've been waiting to ask. And I couldn't believe that you mentioned the name Rosy Simas, because I picked a quote that I would like to read to you and get your opinion. The quote is from Rosalie's Inventing Native Modern Dance, A Tough Trip Through Paradise, back in 2003. Rosalie is Chippewa, and she's the founder of the artistic and director of Daystar, which is a contemporary dance drama Indian American. Here's the quote. Entering the realm of Native performing arts has a similar beauty and austerity. The very existence of Native people and their land, the dances they dance, and the songs they sing beckon to many people. Some see beautiful in the eclectic, others recognize the tradition from which it comes. Still others want to dissect the whole into its components in an effort to find the metamorphic root of the blossoming tree. The long-standing question, looking in from the outside. Here's the question. What is American Indian ritual and performance? My question, Rosalie's, looking from the inside out is, what does a dance and dance performance mean to American Indian? What does it mean to dance traditional or to dance modern? How do these two seemingly contradictory forms coexist for the Native person?
I can't wait to answer this question. So I have probably a controversial view. So having done powwow dance as a child, I understand that at the time that was really a contemporary form. Powwow is not that old. And Native people are very inventive and reinventive and resourceful. Look at the jingle dress, right? What's it made out of? We adopted cloth, we adopted metal, we adopted other things. And so tradition is always responding to contemporary. And so traditional is contemporary at the same time. If you go to a powwow, they have traditional dance, fancy dance, you know, and so I don't know. I mean, the traditional dance usually reserved for people over 30. Because it's slower? I'm not sure. But, so, you know, I don't know. But I would say that it's natural for us to shift, to be resourceful but we're also scared. And that's why I think my answer is controversial, because we have already had our cultures stripped from us. And so we are latching on in a way that maybe we didn't 300, 400 years ago, with complete understanding of why we are. But I think there are contemporary visual artists, performing artists, and writers who are mixing up and shaking up things. And I think that's important, because I think we've always been that way. I think that Handsome Lake, who is our prophet, the Minneapolis prophet, we have a new religion. You know, that is the Handsome Lake religion. That was probably controversial at the time as well.
I think all of those questions are really beautiful things to be thinking about and reflect the work. And I think part of the Native Hawaiian community latches on to what is deemed as traditional because of how it's been commodified and is now the lifeblood of the islands in terms of tourism and how they sell and package who we are and what we are, and how that brings in wonderful and needed support. So I think that's an interesting space where that holding on to tradition and what it looks like becomes limiting. That's an intense question that's really hard. It also just makes me think a little bit about what you were saying, that your work is Native because you are Native. And so one of the biggest compliments I got performing in Hawaii to date was I did something very modern. It was a structured improvisation where the audience could control the score, and I had to respond in all of the ways that that music prompted. And a Native Hawaiian person came up to me and told me it was a beautiful hula. And I felt like he started to grasp this concept that because I am informed by that culture, being part of it, that the expression that I have in my body is an extension of something that is traditional, even if it may not appear that way. So I think that's the best way I can say it.
Impressive answers. Thank you. Shall I say, do we have time for any questions, or is this it?
This is getting a little...
Okay.
As Rosy said so beautifully, we have to shift, we have to be resourceful, and we have to respond to what's happening now. And what's happening now is that there was rain outside, and so the music group will have to move inside. I want to thank you all for your insights, for your willingness to share with us your feelings and your thoughts through words. For dancers, that can be very difficult because our language is really movement. And all of us bring to our movement, to every artistry, to everything we do, our heritage, who we are. It impacts what we do, how we express ourselves. And we thank you all so, so very much, and we really look forward to your performance at Dance Place Saturday and Sunday. Thanks so much.
Thank you.